have the latest technology. We all see some value, whatever it may be, in having things that work better for us as technology improves. However, we also hate to buy that washing machine or whatever it is, that appliance that has a built-in life, where after 2 years, it's going to flood our floors and we're going to end up looking for a new one. Wouldn't it be nice to have a choice, to be able to say, okay, I want to buy something that's a throwaway item, or let's say a recyclable item in terms of recovering the materials and the components, or I want to have something that I'm perfectly happy to live with for 10 years. Now, okay, I'm going to pay double for that, but I'm going to live with it for 10 years. So, companies need to make a little bit of more money on that because, they're not going to have me as a repeat customer. So we've got this kind of two sides working against each other. I want to go forward with the latest devices, but I don't want to see the waste of devices that I throw away. This is the decision that the circular economy in some way has to solve.
Okay.
Hello there. Okay. I think you're right, Michael. And I think the other piece of this is that the circular economy really is also either another word or a version of the whole sustainability concept, right? And that, sustainability at one level is this, recycling renewable resources and this sort of thing. But sustainability is also the point that you talk about. When we make very disposable assets, we're creating tomorrow's trash bin in some way, shape, or form. Electronics aren't the most recyclable devices on the planet. In fact, they're probably the opposite of that. But there's balance, right? And if we come back to your appliance example, I thought was a good one, because it used to be that appliances lasted 20 years. That no one could remember when they bought their dryer or refrigerator because it was a very long time ago. Now, mostly you do. And the reason why you remember when it was is because to make them more energy efficient, the pumps have gotten lighter weight and they draw less power, but they also have less life cycle to them. So they're not designed to last 20 years. They're designed to last 6 or 8, that sort of thing. And that's a trade-off that we've decided at this point is a good one. And that, okay, we're going to get that energy efficiency, which is key and certainly a good concept, but we're going to trade off and we're going to buy 3 of these over 20 years instead of 1. And I think sometimes that's a great choice, and maybe sometimes we might reconsider whether that's a great choice. And I think society's trying to find that middle ground where those discussions can happen. I think 5 or 10 years ago, over the last 5 or 10 years, mostly if you brought up that idea of, well, I have to buy 3 of them, how can that be better? You were interpreted to be some kind of Cro-Magnon person that just wasn't, didn't know what the word green meant. I have a daughter that's a sustainability major in university, so I'm very familiar with the various angles on these discussions, and I've learned a lot from her. But I think those are some of the core concepts beyond that base premise of how do we do things that are greener, that are better for the environment from the jump, from the materials. If we come back to lead-free, we deemed lead has lots of negatives. We eliminated lead from the equation. That's fundamentally good for the workers, the environment, everything else. Even in our space in the cleaning world, over the years, things have continued to get greener and greener from both the environmental perspective and the worker safety perspective. Those are long-term trends that are very positive, I think, that are just going to continue.
But when we look at the washing machine example, now we're buying 3. 2 of them, in the meantime, are landing on landfill or being thrown into the oceans or something. What are we doing as an industry, as the electronics industry, to make sure that parts of it, or ideally the whole thing, somehow gets... So we buy our washing machine, it lasts for 2 years, we don't throw it away, it goes back to the manufacturer, he takes out the bits, they get cleaned, they get, whatever we need to do in terms of processes to make that next machine using the parts that we've already had. That, to me, is that circle of manufacturing. Are we set up as an electronics industry to be able to cope with that? Like, do we have the right materials? Do we have the right machines or processes to deal with that?
I think we're getting there in terms of technologies, of materials. There are 2 elements that need to kind of be added to the equation right now. The first is in design, and really this goes back to the original manufacturers of the machines, where they need to adjust the design to make things more easy to recycle or upgrade rather than replace, or enhancement.
Or perhaps simply repair.
Even repair, yeah, because that does seem to be discouraged today. It seems to cost a lot of money to repair things, which needn't be so. So, making products fit into that environment, I think, is very interesting. The other element is, should an appliance have done its life and somebody's chosen to recycle it, how do you then recycle it? So is there a code that I can read that gives me the information about what this appliance contains? And this is going beyond what we see today as regulatory compliance in terms of tell me how much lead and tell me how much of the other.
On the big picture, but if you take the small picture, say plastics. Most plastics have that number, that little triangle with the number on the bottom.
Yeah.
And people that are informed on that know what that second life road goes to, right? I think there's one where there's no second life, but most of them, I think there's 6 or 7 different codes. Simple, didn't add a lot of cost to the equation, and a good outcome. Maybe there's a road like that for us.
Probably so. We've messed up plastics, let's face it. And if we messed up something that simple by putting all of these plastic particles into our oceans, when we come to look at electronic products, it's going to be a lot more difficult because there are so many different materials and elements in them. How do we define what's in there, where they are, and how then to recycle them?
Agreed, but there's 2 challenges, right? The plastic, we messed up because we've developed habit patterns where we throw things away. Okay.
No, those were the good habits.
Well, those were the good habits.
No.
So what were the bad habits?
The bad habits is where we went on to the plastic that biodegrades, because people said, oh, this biodegrades into nothing, so it must be great. It's not nothing. It actually goes into these tiny little plastic particles that have made their way into the sea, and then they make their way into the fish that makes its way into us. Is that really good? Do you want to have that bottle inside you? Because that's what you end up with.
I'm pleased that you don't already think there's some there. So I think that's a positive stuff. But you're right, and that comes back to thinking through what is that end game. If I've got, we're picking on the washing machine folks.
Yeah.
But you've got a nice hard metal frame, probably mild steel. You've got a little motor in there. We've got some relatively simple electronics. That stuff could be stripped, and certainly the metal could find its way home, and a great deal of that mass could be restricted or repurposed with some practical things. But I think just repairing things will go, especially in electronics, is something. Let's face it. Years ago, there were electronics repair shops all over everywhere, and all those ladies and gentlemen have retired and gone out of business. I don't think there's an electronics repair shop left on Earth.
Well, that's maybe the key point, and that's really leads into my next question, which is about how viable is it really to do? Is it going to become quite mainstream because of, I don't know, consumer pressure, industry pressure, or whatever? Or is there going to be a niche industry for circular economy compliant products? Electrical products or whatever, and consumer might want to pay a premium to get that washing machine that is fully recyclable, but actually economically it might not be viable for your normal manufacturer of mobile telephones to do this? Is it?
If we look at the real big picture going forward, we have to realize that life on Earth is finite. There are certain resources that we use, and when they're gone, they're gone. Okay, we'll try and find alternatives, we'll try and find a way around it, but essentially it's gone. So the answer to the question is yes, we have to. We absolutely have to in order to preserve our lifestyle going on for our children and children's children. So we are basically faced with knowing there's a problem, knowing it has to be fixed, and now trying to work out how to solve the problem of a new phone every year, or being able to provide an appliance that will last an expected 5 years or 10 years or more. So we have to, and you had the point perfectly, think it through. Don't just have a knee-jerk reaction on, throwing away a plastic ring destroys wildlife, and then polluting the sea with bits of plastic pellets. Think it through. This is what we have to do to make sure that we can recover elements from the recycled products that we're able to provide repair when necessary, or even upgrade, upcycling things. All of that needs to be part of the solution, I think.
So when you look around a show like this, when you talk to your clients, when you look at your own processes, are we at the beginning of this journey discussing it and finding out how to deal with it? Are we already involved in it? Is it already something on all of our agenda?
I'm not so sure it's already on industry's agenda in a broad-based way. It is a bit, but I believe where it is on people's agenda in a broad-based way is out in the community. The reality is that while there's different labels put on it, the idea of not only recycling but life cycle, like for example, if my daughter was here, she'd be yelling at me because I could have one of those metal bottles that I filled with water and not had half a dozen of these today. She'd say, "Dad, that's foolish. You're creating waste where it simply doesn't have to happen." And people being willing to make that choice is what will change the game. All right, and that'll change it on electronics. The reality is our phones are tremendously powerful. Everyone's already starting to see, just like it happened with PCs years ago, at a certain point, the software, the software hangs up waiting for the next chip, and eventually the chips are so powerful that the software can't suck it all out of it, right? And things sort of plateau. Once that happens, the upgrade mentality fades a bit, and the longevity factor kicks in there. But I think one of the real factors in our industry is this notion of repairability. Can things actually be repaired in a reasonably economic way? I'm not so sure that's a design criteria in in some spaces for sure, military, sort of stuff. But certainly in the consumer world, we've sort of wholeheartedly adopted, use it and toss it. Yeah. And I think that's an area that may get revisited as these practices that are in other areas are, well, how different is a phone than a bottle with the water in it, right? I mean, at some point they're kind of the same, and I think it's going to be a push. I don't think industry's going to lead the way here. I think industry's going to follow what their customers want and build in these functions in the future.
It's difficult because on one hand, the consumers want to have the phone, the latest phone, every year, every 2 years, yet at the same time they're putting pressure on us to deliver stuff that is sustainable.
On a practical note, I mean, if we were manufacturing that phone, for example, we could use a factory that would monitor all of the materials, track, trace everything that's going on about it, full traceability, complete build record, digital everything. Then, when you decide you want a new phone, that phone could go back to the manufacturer. Let's say it was faulty. It could be repaired because you see the complete history. You can then build up a picture of what was it about that phone that caused it to fail, and how can we design phones in the future that will not fail like that, or how can we design them to be upgraded. So that kind of circular involving manufacturing today in the digital factory and having that repair cycle go back through them, I think that's a great way of learning about this.
And that brings the compatibility, the interoperability, if you will, of different generations of devices. If that data set existed that had a very precise, comprehensive record of, well, gee, what's in here? All right. And do I really know? And are these the same model or not? If there was an easy scan where that could be sourced, well, now you're enabling some of that stuff. And I guess the other thing that we often forget is, the iPhone 10 was an anniversary, right? They skipped 9, didn't they? Right? It's been 10 years. In 10 years, we've gone from no smartphones to a billion, ridiculous number. Yeah. Surely there's a saturation in the horizon if we're making 1 billion a year. At some point, right?
Yeah.
And especially at $1,000 a pop. I think all of these factors encourage people to perform, to think of those things, and to maybe be more open to that idea.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great selling feature. Frankly, if Samsung or Apple said, "Hey, you can recycle your phone, or you can do this and do that," I think that would be a big plus for them.
Well, the technology is available today to do that complete manufacturing, the gathering of all the traceability data, actionable data. It's all part of the smart factory. We can just choose to use our smart factory data for good as well in this way. So the tools are already available today. What we need to do is to encourage people to actually start using them.
And hopefully a panel discussion like this gives you some ideas and influence as to potentially how you approach your manufacturing. Thank you once again for joining the panel. And I hope you enjoyed the talk today.